The Gospel reading today, bringing us a message of hope, is taken from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 15, and reading verses 21 to 28. And here is the reading. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Yes, it is, Lord," she said. "Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." And her daughter was healed that moment. Thanks be to God for his holy word. Amen. I wonder if those of you who were alive at the end of the last millennium remember the Ford Motor Company producing their very ever first Ford Focus. Well, I have to tell you, I absolutely loved that car. And I was privileged to own one and drive one for 7 years during the noughties. Absolutely loved that car. I loved the way that it took off like a rocket from a standstill. I loved how sweet it was to drive. In fact, if you read any good car mag today, they'll tell you that it's still the best car in its class if you like a driving experience. Loved the Ford Focus so much that I've even got a model of it, die-cast model. Mine was a lighter blue than that, but absolutely loved the Ford Focus. And no, I'm not on commission with the Ford Motor Company. Just saying. One of the reasons why I was thinking about my beloved Ford Focus today was because I was on the subject of focus altogether, and not in my need for a focus back in the noughties, but sometimes we all have a need to focus. I certainly realise that when I come to these video sermons every Sunday, that there is a need for focus. Take this passage that we're on today, for example, from Matthew 15 and verses 21 to 28. Seems on the face of it such a simple story, but the deeper you go into it, the more multi-layered it becomes. Honestly, if I were to say all that I could say about this passage, we would be here all day. So I have to focus. But of course, in focusing, and I know this sometimes from some of the feedback I get by email, for example, it's a bit frustrating for some of you because perhaps I've focused on an area of the passage that you'd like me to talk about. And I know sometimes it leaves some of you frustrated or disappointed that that bit wasn't touched on. But as I say, unless I'm going to say everything and therefore perhaps say nothing, I have to focus on literally a focal point. Well, I understand it might mean that some of you sometimes are a little disappointed. So what we're going to focus on today is focusing. And we're going to do that in three ways. And the first thing that we're going to focus on is the Canaanite woman herself and the love that made her focus on her mission. And she was willing to maintain that focus for as long as it took for her to be able to say, mission accomplished. She certainly did have to maintain a focus because there were so many things to discourage her, weren't there? Even Jesus himself appears to ignore her for the longest time, but she's determined to maintain her focus. His disciples, they can't stand the hullabaloo that she's created, and they urge Jesus to send her away and stop being such a nuisance. She's hearing what they're saying, and she has to maintain her focus for as long as it takes until her mission is accomplished. Sometimes it's hard to maintain focus for a long time, isn't it? They say the most effective people in the world are the ones who are able to maintain their focus long after the initial energy and enthusiasm has waned. But you'll know in other ways sometimes how difficult maintaining focus can be. Perhaps when you were a child, you might remember playing that staring game where you challenge your brother or your sister or another person to be the first one who had to look away. And if you did break the stare, you'd lost. I know what it's like to have to maintain focus just doing these video sermons. In the early days of doing these video sermons, I used to actually look myself in the eye at myself on the screen, and don't tell anybody, but I used to talk to myself. I soon learned, though, that if I were to effectively talk to you, I had to ignore my face on the screen, and I had to maintain my focus on the webcam. And sometimes that seems like an eternity to me. So goodness knows how it feels for you, but you don't have to answer that. I don't need to hear that in any feedback, okay? So I know what it's like to have to focus for as long as it takes. The reason why this woman is focusing for as long as it takes is because of the love that she has for her daughter. Did you notice that when she comes to Jesus, falls on her knees, she doesn't say, "Lord, have mercy on my daughter." She said, "Lord, have mercy on me. Because if anything happens to my daughter, it may as well be happening to me. So I've got so much I stand to lose. So have mercy on me. And I'm going to focus on this prayer request. I will be persistent until I can say mission accomplished. Because it's love that's making me focus in the way that I am." When I was thinking about these things, I was thinking about one of the most perhaps overused words in the English language, which is that word passion. Have you noticed that these days everybody has a passion for something? I become aware of this when I'm reading application forms for jobs. Read this so many times. The applicant will say, "I have a passion for this. I have a passion for that." And maybe me being cynical, but I sometimes think, do you? Do you really? Do you really have this passion? And you see it in companies, don't you? Their mission statements, and sometimes even in their in-store advertising. So, for example, you're walking around the local hardware store, and there'll be a big banner up over one of the aisles, and it says something like, "We have a passion for wing nuts." Sitting there looking at it, think, really? Do you have a passion for wing nuts, honestly? Such an overused word, isn't it? If only people realise that the Latin root of the word passion actually comes from patio, to suffer. That's why we call the last week of Jesus' life the Passion. It's because he's suffering. And this woman, in her suffering, had enough passion to focus for as long as it would take until she could say, mission accomplished. So it begs the question, doesn't it, for us, for you, for me? Rather than overusing the word, what do we have a passion for that is so strong that we will maintain our focus until we can say mission accomplished. What are the things, like the woman in our story today, that we fear losing so much that we will focus for as long as it takes to protect that thing in Jesus' name? So that's our first bit of focus, is focusing on the woman as she has a love that makes her focus for as long as it takes. But let's shift our focus now and let's move to focusing upon Jesus, who himself is focusing perhaps on his own mission and perhaps focusing on what lies at the very core of his being. We haven't read all of the verses today. We've read verses 21 to 28. We had an option to start at verse 10, where Jesus is talking about the fact that the Pharisees sometimes forbid the eating of certain kinds of food, especially if you haven't ritually washed your hands. And Jesus is saying there, it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. It's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. And I think the point that he's making really is that what comes out of your mouth actually shows what is at the core of your being. And it may be that Jesus has got away to Tyre and Sidon, a Gentile territory, simply because he knows he won't be interrupted there. Well, he did well on that one, didn't he? But because the Jews won't follow him there to the Gentile territory, he knows that he can have some time to focus on his mission, focus on the core of his being, especially because the cross is approaching and his shadow will loom over the rest of this gospel more and more. A passion that we were talking about, I don't know what this must feel like, but surely it must concentrate the mind, knowing that the cross is just around the corner. You will be focusing on your mission. You will be focusing on the core of your being. Of course, one of the things that seems to be at the core of his being in this passage is, well, we didn't realise this about Jesus, but you do sound a bit brusque. You do sound a bit harsh, actually, in the way that you talk to this woman. It's not right to toss the children's bread to the dogs. I came only for the lost of Israel. Just sound a bit harsh. Just sound a bit brusque. Here's a thought, though. In the original Greek manuscript, there's no punctuation. There's not even a break between sentences. So sometimes we don't know whether it's a statement that's being made or a question that's being asked. And if the punctuation were placed differently in this passage, it may be that Jesus isn't actually uttering harsh statements, but actually asking of himself in a Shakespearean soliloquy kind of way questions about his own mission, questions about what lies at the core of his being. Oh, that's all well and good, Tom, but we don't know what a Hamlet soliloquy or a Shakespearean soliloquy is. Well, I'll give the game away there, because you do actually. You know one from Hamlet, don't you? Every one of us surely knows to be or not to be. Surely everyone watching has said that at some point in their lives, to be or not to be. If you've ever said it, that's Hamlet asking questions about himself at the start of what's called a Shakespearean soliloquy, speaking alone. Speaking from Loch War, sol, as in solo, alone, speaking alone. Shakespearean soliloquy is asking himself questions, to be or not to be. That is the question, he says. And then he goes on with a series of other questions, which basically help him to focus on his mission, which in this case is to avenge the murder of his father, and perhaps to focus on what seems to lie at the core of his being, which is this capacity for procrastination, which in the end, as you may know, is his downfall. Is Jesus doing the same kind of thing? He doesn't say to be or not to be, of course. But rather than curtly saying, I came only for the lost sheep of Israel? Is he thinking out loud? Did I actually come only for the lost sheep of Israel? Rather than brusquely saying, it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Is he asking himself a genuine question? Is it right to do that or no? This kind of focus on his mission, this kind of focus on the core of his being, as I say, will get ever more intense as he approaches Calvary. And perhaps never more intense than when he's in Gethsemane. And when he says to his Father, Father, if it's possible, will you let this cup pass from me? I wonder if that's a way of him questioning his mission. Is this the best way to complete my mission, by dying on a cross? Perhaps it is about the core of his being. Charles Wesley would go and say, how can it be that the immortal dies? Well, if he is, in the best Shakespearean terms, doing some kind of self-searching, soul-seeking soliloquy, is in no better company than this Canaanite woman who overhears him. Because the thing about her is that she's part of a historical enemy group of the people of Israel, the Canaanites. So she's not going to want to soft soap him or tell him exactly what he wants to hear. Unlike the disciples, they are always so slow, aren't they, to get the point. Amazing that we'll see in a few moments that this woman has a massive insight into who Jesus really is. And yet, as we found last week, it took up till last week with the Walking on the Water episode for the disciples to say, truly, you are the Son of God. It will take until chapter 16 for Peter to make the confession, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. This woman, so-called enemy, is there straight away. But because she's there straight away, and because she is a so-called enemy, she's not going to be in his echo chamber. She's not going to be only saying to him the things that he's already going to agree with. She's not going to be saying to him the things that she thinks he wants to hear, as, for example, Peter will do when he talks about going to the cross and Jesus ends up saying, get behind me, Satan. That's the whole point about this woman. She's not an echo chamber. And when she starts to contradict and contest Jesus, she's helping him in these questions about his mission, helping him in these questions about what lies at the core of his being. I was recently reading on a post that sometimes we need to exit the echo chamber that we create for ourselves in our lives in order to get a proper focus on what our mission really should be, on what really is at the core of our being, the who we are kind of question. So easy to create echo chambers where we only hear the views that we already know we agree with, where people will only say to us the things that we think they think we want to hear. So much more difficult to seek out the people who you know won't mince their words. Those people who you know will tell you how he really is. It's not always easy, it's not always comfortable. But if we're going to focus on what our mission field really is and what really is at the core of our being, as Jesus may have been doing here, it might be time to exit the echo chamber. Churches have echo chambers. They make sure that every Sunday in the pulpit they'll only ever hear their own echo. People have echo chambers because it's just an easy comfortable place to live. This woman didn't allow Jesus to live in an echo chamber. He had to exit the echo chamber. And perhaps one of the challenges of this passage today is that we have to exit it too if we really want to focus. Here's the last focus for us, and it's just to focus on who the woman was focusing on. Focusing on Jesus. And here she is, as I say, this woman who's known him for seconds, unlike the disciples who've walked with him intimately for 3 years and still seem slow to understand. But here she is crying, "Have mercy on me, Son of David." Matthew let us into a secret about Jesus, didn't he? Right at the very start of the gospel in the genealogy, when he told us that he was descended from the house of David. He is the Son of David. And whenever in Matthew's gospel people come and fall on their knees and cry, "Have mercy on me," they often preface it with that royal title, Son of David. Not only a title that says he is king, but also says that he is the Christ, the hope of our hearts. She focuses on his royalty. She focuses on his power, his ability to save. Would have been so easy, wouldn't it, for her to have simply focused upon her problems. Her never knows, as we were saying in our first point, the love that she had for her daughter and the state that her daughter was in. That was a big problem. She could so easily, though, just focused on the size of that problem. She chose instead to raise her eyes and to focus on the Son of David, the King of Kings, the Christ, the Saviour of the world. When I think about these things, it reminded me once when I was at a social occasion, and it became apparent as we were standing in a circle that I'm a Methodist minister. And one of the other guests at this party therefore decided to make sport of me. And in a very loud voice, again, just like Shakespeare would have scripted in one of his plays, I guess, he starts enunciating a really difficult problem that he's having. And then, in a very sort of loud stage cry in front of this audience that's gathered, he says to me in a sort of semi-mocking kind of way, really, will you say a really, really, really big prayer for me? Well, my response to him in front of the audience that he himself had assembled, what I think about it is probably a little priggish, really. Nevertheless, what I did say to him was this: it's not the size of my prayers that matter. It's not even the size of my faith. What matters is the size of my God. Here's this woman. She could so easily have focused on the mountain. I never noticed it was a big enough mountain. But she chose instead to focus on the mountain mover. I hope I'm not going to sound supercilious or priggish or platitudinous when I say this to you, but in this pandemic, all kinds of mountains may have arisen for you. So without being any of those things, but hopefully gently and compassionately, can you at least put the thought in your mind that you might want to just tear your stare away from that mountain, to focus again on the mountain mover. As Charles Wesley would say, give me the faith which can remove and sink the mountain to a plain. To be fair though, Charles, it wasn't the size of your faith, was it? It was the size of your God.